Hello and welcome to the crux of medtech. We go beyond the buzzwords, bringing you the insights from the innovators, investors, and leaders who are driving this life-saving space forward. Because I'm absolutely fascinated by the stories that people have to tell in medtech. As someone who works in this sector on a daily basis, I come across so many interesting people and so many interesting stories that I think the world deserves to know about. Welcome to the crux of medtech. Hello, Adrian, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Henry. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So just to kick off, we want to get a good idea of who Adrian is and, your background. So take us back to the start. How did you get into the working world? What's your background?
So I'm originally from Canada, from near Toronto, and I got an engineering degree at the University of Waterloo. So that's my educational background. From there, moved down to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and then started my career in technology. Spent the first part of my career in semiconductors, hardware. And really that was my training ground. That's where I learned, how to do, many different functions in an organization. And then from there, kind of went from there, into various different things over the years. From semiconductors, I went into the AI industry it was in 2016, 17, is when I joined a company called Grok Incorporated, which was an AI hardware startup, at the time, founded by, a gentleman out of Google. And then I was with that company for about 6 years, helping build that from a few engineers to, you can see them now on social media and they're doing quite well. But a couple of years ago, I moved over to Perimeter, and I was excited about that, to take my experience in technology as an engineer in computer hardware, and then 7 years of experience in AI, and take all that and apply it in a whole brand new domain, healthcare, where the technology has now gone to a place where it can actually be very useful, I think, in this industry. So that's kind of the very shortened version of how I got to where I am right now.
Awesome. And I'd like to dive a little bit deeper on some of that journey. So we'll kind of skip past the semiconductors. It was a great career in there, but Grok is obviously a company that people who are involved in the tech world will have heard of. If people are developing AI, they will be looking at Grok and the chips that are produced. So tell me a bit more about that journey. You started with a few engineers. How did you come across the company? What were you brought in to do, and how did that journey go?
Yeah, so I was introduced to the founder, Jonathan Ross, off that company. So he's the current CEO, founder, by his initial investor, Social Capital, Chamath Palihapitiya. So Chamath and I were at Waterloo together at the same time, both in the same program, electrical engineering program. So I've known him for a while. He introduced me to that company and said, "Hey, look, you've got a semiconductor background. There's a startup here, which I think has some potential. Why don't you meet them and see if, there's some way you can help them?" So I met Jonathan. Jonathan, was great. He's an amazing vision, approaches problems very differently than how the industry, this problem specifically, very differently than how the industry has, approached the inference problem with an AI chips. And a lot of that came from, I think, two areas. One is he spent years within Google. He was the, a key architect of the TPU, which is Google's AI inference engine that they use themselves proprietarily for most of their workloads. So he was key architect of that. So he'd seen this going for even 5 or 6, 7 years before Grok started. So that's how I got introduced to that company. And that was a journey. That it was really great for the time I was there. You start with a few engineers, you make a product, you run into all kinds of challenges. Can you make it work? Can you not make it work? Is this even a thing that's going to be a thing? It was in advance of the market really taking off. 2023 is when OpenAI made released their first LLM. Mm-hmm. So this was 6-7 years before that. Yeah, 6 years before that. So there's a lot of insecurity that goes into a company at that time. Can you make the tech work? Especially when we were doing something very different there. But I do have to give credit to Jonathan. He kept true to his vision of what that product needed to be and why it was advantageous for where the industry was going to go. And it was very much a, skate to where the puck's going to be. And Grok was built in a way that now the puck is where it is, but for Grok to be where it is, had to have started skating in that direction, 7-8 years ago. And so building that company was amazing. I think there's a lot of experiences there that transfer to this company. So small group of engineers. By the time I left, it was a few hundred engineers and salespeople in a whole full stack organization. No ride is smooth. It's not like you start with 5 and then have a linear, monotonic sort of growth path, to the promised land. There's ups and downs and a lot of struggles within that company, across all aspects of the company, which we had to navigate through. But if you can do that and get out to the other side and you have, belief and faith and luck on your side, you can actually make a difference. When I was introduced to this company, I said, hey, look, I'm not, it's hard times to deal with that, but I've done it before and there's no guarantee that'll happen again. But what this company, when I got introduced to Perimeter, what Perimeter's trying to do is so impactful to patients. The problem's big. And if we can help solve this problem, help surgeons solve this problem, reducing a reoperation for a patient is really something worth going after. So, the path from Perimeter's start to when I joined a few years ago to where, we hope to take it in the future, it won't be linear, and there will be ups and downs, and there will be times when, everyone will lose the faith. And then there'll be, the only thing that holds you together is the belief that what we're doing can have a great outcome at the end, and you can change your destiny. So, I think that was some of the experience I got there, and seeing that be successful, gives me a little bit of hope that, we're not living in a fantasy world. It's possible to do it again here.
Absolutely. And we're going to really dive into Perimeter because I think the technology and the products, both what's available now and also into the future is an incredible piece of tech and kit. And, I can see exactly why you joined the company. From a perspective of how did you get introduced to Perimeter? So where you were in Grok in a really senior position, chief operations officer, and going through this hockey stick curve that it has gone through with challenges at the start. But Grok has still not reached the complete limit of its potential in a lot of people's eyes, and definitely my eyes. So what was it about Perimeter that stood out to you? Why did you make the change over to a healthcare company from AI?
Yeah, well, I was introduced. So both Grok and Perimeter share the same major shareholder, Social Capital. So I was introduced to Perimeter through Shamath. So I guess if you have a thesis, which I do, that AI will change industry, right? There's no question about it in my mind. It's changing it right now. Fast forward 5, 10, 20 years from now, it's going to change in ways that we can't even imagine. You hate to do comparisons, but it's a little bit like comparing the world before the internet and after, and perhaps it's even more significant than that. I don't know. But if you believe that, then there's a few things. If you want to participate in that, if in a work like in industry, then there's a few things I think you look for in companies. One is you look for a company that can use AI to help their core, help solve the core problem they're trying to solve, and bolt it onto a core technology that unto itself is also extremely valuable, right? And if you can find that sort of combination, then you've got depth to the company, and you then have an accelerant called AI that's going to help you do something that's actually going to be valuable to your customers. Okay, so Perimeter has that. We can talk about it in more detail in a moment. The other thing you look for is you look at what creates value in the AI world. And in my view, there's kind of 3 things that create value. One is the hardware, right? Can you develop hardware that you can train AI and then use, do inference, provide answers with the AI, at scale, cheaply, quickly, and effectively, right? So that's the Grok world. That's the NVIDIA world. Okay, fine. Then there is, can you make the algorithms, right? And the trouble with algorithms in terms of valuation for a company is that a lot of that's open sourced. So you could spend millions and tens, hundreds of millions of dollars creating an awesome valuation, awesome algorithm, and you wake up one morning and it's been open sourced by some company halfway around the world. All right, so it's a huge amount of. So that's a very, very tough place to be. And you're seeing it right now with OpenAI and others. And then there's the data. And can you have a proprietary data set that no one else can replicate, that you own, that you can protect, and then you can build and you can use it to train your algorithm? And Perimeter has that, had that then, and we continue to build it out. So these were the things I was looking for. And when I looked at Perimeter, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I believe that AI is going to change industry. Here's a company that's working in a very, very impactful parts of industry, healthcare, cancer. And it has these raw elements where if you can put them together the right way, you can really ride this AI wave, to build a nice little moat, build a nice little company and help solve a problem that's, very, very tough problem to solve.
Awesome. So on that note, I think it's worth diving into what Perimeter actually does and how it helps the market. So give us an overview of the technology and give us a good picture of what's available now and also what the future will enable.
Okay. So let me just start with the problem statement. So the problem that we're trying to solve at Perimeter is the idea of having reoperations, having to go back for a second cancer surgery. It turns out it's very difficult for surgeons to make sure they got all the cancer out in that very, very first surgery. And all too often it requires a follow-up surgery. And so the phrase, did you get it all? Or we left some behind, everyone knows what that means without even, having knowing that it's cancer, right? It's very common. So that's the problem we're trying to solve, trying to make it so the surgeon in that very first operation can have a high degree of confidence that they have been able to remove all of the cancer. And therefore the patient doesn't need to come back. The patient can start on chemo or radiation very, very quickly. The patient's health is better. The stress on the system's better. It's a massive problem, both from an emotional standpoint, a health standpoint, outcome standpoint, as well as an economic standpoint. Okay, so there's the problem that we're trying to solve. We solve the problem using two pieces of technology. One is a type of imaging technology. It's called OCT, or optical coherence tomography. I can go into as much detail as you want, but maybe at a surface level, I'll say it's very much like ultrasound, but whereas ultrasound uses sound waves to bounce off the tissue and then reconstruct an image of what it sees inside that tissue, we use infrared. OCT uses infrared light. Same concept, bounces the infrared light off the tissue, and from that, the computer can reconstruct a picture on the screen. Very widely used technology. We've all had an OCT image taken off our retina at the eye doctor at some point in our life, maybe every year. So very, very much out there. But an eyeball's small, about 1 centimeter diameter. So the OCT cameras and technologies out there are able to take a picture that big. A tumor that a surgeon takes out of the body is bigger than that. So IP sort of technology number one is, how do you make an OCT camera bigger so that you can take a picture of that entire tumor? So we did that. We have that. That's the OCT. I'm going to call it the OCT camera from now on.
Sure.
That's the OCT camera we have that no one else has. Technology number two is the AI. So what the AI does is it will look at all the images created by that OCT camera, and it will identify areas that it finds to be suspicious. There's something suspicious in the picture, potentially cancer cells. Okay. And what that camera and what that AI will do is identify that, present that to the surgeon, and then the surgeon can look at that during the operation while the patient's on the table and make their own determination of whether they feel like there is still some cancer there. And if so, they can do something further with the patient. So this is what the AI aims to do. Right now, it's running through an FDA approval process, so a review process. So it's mid-course right now, and we hope to get that out by the end of the year. But these are the two technologies we're working on. You put both of these two things together, and you have a very compelling potential solution for surgeons where they've got a very advanced imaging technology, but it becomes much, much easier to use when you overlay that AI assistant on top of that.
Okay. Awesome.
Put that in the operating room with the surgeon, with the patient right there. Now they can have a high degree of confidence when they close that patient up that they've gotten all the cancer in that first surgery.
I'm interrupting this episode to bring you a word from our sponsors, TTP. TTP is a leader in complex medical technology development with deep scientific and engineering expertise. They support ambitious medtech companies in solving high-risk, high-complexity challenges where there's no margin for error. Whether you're tackling uncharted technical territory or racing to bring a product to market, TTP provide clarity and direction. By de-risking innovation and ensuring seamless alignment with regulatory and manufacturing demands, TTP help you move forward with speed and confidence. To find out more, check out the show notes.
Understood. So super cool technology, very big impact in terms of what it does. We've actually had a company called Samantri Medical on the podcast before as well, which has a different approach in terms of a histological scanner for that kind of margin assessment. Margin assessment has a big play to be made, because just talking about some of the challenges with Olivier, who came on the pod, of what surgeons currently do, or what hospital groups currently do. He told me about one where they take a tumor from one building, they get someone on a bike and they cycle 15 minutes down the road, take it to a lab, bring it back, and then put it back in. And then they're like, okay, yeah, we either need to reoperate, or there's no way to actually even do the pathology. So you think you've got it, you probably don't have it at the end of it. So it's a real big area where there's definitely a lot of value. Keep the readmissions down, and also try and make sure that you've got all the cancer the first time, pretty much every time. So super cool technology, and nice parallels in terms of the space that you guys are going after. And I guess my question really comes as next is, like, where did this technology really come from? So we've talked about how you got involved with it. Where was the origin story of the tech to start with?
Yeah. So the company was founded in Toronto about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit over now. And there were a couple founders. They spun out of, I guess, an incubator type of organization. And really they did the work, right? So they had this theory that this OCT imaging technology could be used for margin assessments. But of course the size, of the picture it could take was too small. So can we create a bigger picture? And they were able to do that. And it ended up being a very complicated thing to do, for multiple reasons. One is, can you take multiple pictures? It's very, very high resolution. I think that's very important to understand, that the advantage OCT has over other imaging technologies like X-ray and ultrasound is that it can look at very, very fine detail where the other ones cannot. And you have to be able to do that to see if you've got clear margins. But because of that, precision, taking the picture is not easy. Think about taking a picture of something with your normal iPhone camera far away, and you shake a little bit and it gets really fuzzy. That's the sort of concept. So a bunch of things have to be invented. One is, how do you take multiple pictures and stitch them together in a way to make a big picture? How do you move that camera around? Move the camera around to be able to gather all those pictures fast enough that it doesn't impact the workflow in the operating room. It can't take an hour. But also with enough stability so the picture's not fuzzy. How do you very finely calibrate how far away the camera is from that tissue? Obviously, the camera's not directly touching the tissue, right? So how do you do that? So there was a bunch of optical engineering, a bunch of software engineering, a bunch of, frankly, chemical engineering. There's glass in between. There's coatings on the glass that absorb or don't absorb different light waves appropriately. There's mechanical engineering involved with making sure that tissue has a nice contact with the glass. So it was a very, very complicated. It took a long time to engineer all of these things together. But if you can do that successfully, you get to, where we are right now, where you can take some really nice pictures that has a good promise for what we can do, how a surgeon can use it.
Excellent. And with the AI component, this seems like it's quite a large proportion of the technology. So the OCT, it's a great technology, it's for the imaging, but the AI seems to be where the real value is created to kind of take that guesswork out of the margin assessment. So one of the things you told me about is that they're capturing a huge amount of new data as a company in terms of perimeter. So tell us a little bit more about how that AI first came into development, what I guess this enables beyond just in the future, of course, because this is under FDA at the moment, but in the future, what's the AI really going to enable as a surgeon or healthcare provider?
Yeah, so a couple things. So let me go through that. We started by collecting images with the camera, which you have to do. So under sort of a study and protocol, we collected a number of images. And then there's a theory. So this is before my time, but there was a theory the company had that we could develop an algorithm that can identify suspicious features. So we collected images, we correlated that against pathology to make sure that, we were capturing what they said were cancerous cells versus healthy cells. Then we just started training algorithms. And it's an iterative process. You train an algorithm, you see how it does, you then improve it and improve over time. Then two things happen. One is as you have more data, the images the output gets better. And two, as, the state of the art of AI improves, you get more sophisticated algorithms, number one, and you get more performant hardware, number two. So now you have to run the algorithms in the operating room on the machine that's sitting in there. You can't really send it out to the cloud and back, for various reasons. So, you then ride along the hardware curve, all the things NVIDIA is bringing out, right? Every year or 2 years, there's something even better and faster, which then allows you to make more sophisticated algorithms that'll fit into the time frame the surgeon's willing to give you to do the work. So these two things are going on in parallel all the time. More data, better algorithms, better hardware. Okay, wonderful. Now, what does that actually provide to the surgeon? A few things. One is the ability to have AI. Okay, so let me back out a moment. If you've ever seen an ultrasound image, which all of us have at some point in time, it's not exactly the easiest thing to understand for a layperson. You look at it and say, it's a boy. Really? I couldn't tell that by looking at that picture, but I'll take your word for it. The OCT images they're not precise like ultrasound images, but they're sort of in that same vein. It's black and white. Sometimes it's hard to understand what you're looking at. So there's a training required for any new user to really understand that. So if you have an AI assistant that can point your eye at the right place and say, we think there's something suspicious here based off all the millions of images we've been trained on, then that helps reduce the training burden, right? What that does is it brings the tech to more surgeons out there potentially, right? So you go to a new surgeon, you tell them, hey, we got this awesome new imaging technology that can, potentially help you reduce your, improve your margin assessments. And they say, great, I love it. How do I use it? And then you say that there's a training program and you have to learn how to read OCT images. And then they say, on a spectrum, they say, great, I am willing to put the effort in, or, that's one end of the spectrum. Let's do it. And the other end of the spectrum is, that sounds too hard. I'm a surgeon, not a radiologist. I don't want to do that. Sure. Come back when it's easier to use and I don't have to spend time training, right? Okay, you bring in AI algorithm, it helps reduce that training burden. It allows us to bring the tech to more and more surgeons, more and more patients out there. That's number one. Number two is it helps speed up the review of all these images in the operating room. So we capture hundreds, maybe 1,000 images from every patient. The surgeon without AI would have to look through all of those images to identify, with their eyes, just, manually, anything that looks suspicious. Takes concentration, takes time. With the AI assist, they can focus that energy on a fewer number of places, and then make their assessment based off of that. So saves time, saves mental energy, makes it easier. Number three, which is this is the magic of AI, is it only gets better over time. So as the hardware gets better, as the algorithms get better, and as we get more data, what we will bring to market every year will end up being better than what was available the year before, which over time will help improve the confidence of the surgeons using the product, and then result hopefully in reduced re-excisions for all those patients with all the benefits that brings. So, this is not just bring a product to market and then it's done. This is a continuous process of improvement over years and years and years, decades for us.
Awesome. And then I guess if you got any clinical figures, what's the clinical data that you've collected so far on both OCT, if you've got that, or, well, I'm sure you have got OCT, on the AI algorithm because it's going through an FDA process? What's the kind of clinical data that backs this up?
Yeah, so there's two things I'll talk about. We've got two products. One's approved by the FDA. We'll call that the S series, which is in, a few dozen hospitals around the US today, with surgeons using it in their procedures. And then we've got a future product, which is undergoing FDA review right now, which we call the B series, which we'll get a better name for, but right now we call it the B series, which has that AI on it and is targeted specifically to breast cancer. And hopefully that, the review process will be wrapped up towards the beginning of next year. So we have data, that we've started to collect on the OCT part of the of the technology through the S series that's in market today. And it looks good, in terms of what all the studies say. So the studies show several things. They show you can take good images, off tissue. It shows that the tissue is not damaged by being on the machine. So when it goes to pathology afterwards, it still has the integrity, that the pathologist needs. We've got several dozen surgeons and hospitals using the product. So within their facilities, they're seeing the results of using that product with their patients, which is causing their colleagues to want to use it and is helping us sort of get this OC technology spread within each of those hospitals more. And then we've got some white papers that show the performance of the technology with the surgeons that are using it right now over some subsets of patients that they've studied. And that data is looking quite nice as well. In parallel to all that, because we've had several thousand patients go through, we have stood up a registry. We are collecting data through that registry, and we're in the process of putting some papers together with that, our current device to show that performance and how it compares before, after, using it, and then versus the, standard re-excision rate right now for the different types of cancers that we're in. If you just look at breast cancer, it's about 20%, about 1 in 5 women have to go back for a second surgery. So do a comparison against that. I think it's going to be very powerful when the data that we've got gets reviewed and released into the public.
Awesome. So, completely hear you on that. So the Series S, which is out in the market right now, are you doing kind of a full commercial rollout with that? Or are you waiting for the Series B to do something, to go fully to the market and commercialize?
Yeah, no, we're doing a full rollout with that at this point. Now, we're being careful in how we roll it out. One of the lessons learned when running smaller companies that are still, to use a phrase, living off investor money and we're not earning our own keep, is you have to be careful at how quickly you expand parts of the business in a very controlled manner. A classic mistake is expanding too fast before you really know how to scale. And burning a whole lot of money, making mistakes. So, experiment small scale and then go big from that. So we are in full commercial mode on the S series, but with a very small sales team and very select, we're being very selective in the markets we're in, and then the partners we work with. So we do have a long, I'll call it a backlog, a sales pipeline, let's say, of surgeons that are interested in working with us that we're just unable to service right now because we really want to make sure we've got our sales process, good and tight. FDA approval, hopefully the review will be done early next year. So hopefully we get the next gen B series in the market at that point. What this allows us to do, having the S series today in market, allows us to have a user base that's already used to, to some extent how the basic technology works, and allows us to move them over to the next generation product. Having the current product in the market has created a lot of buzz within the breast surgeon community. So a lot of them, almost all of them have heard of us, understand what we're doing. Margin assessment is a big deal. And almost all of them understand that there is an AI enabled device going through review right now. So what I expect is we spend the rest of this year with our relatively small sales team, perhaps a little bit bigger, seeding those, the bigger markets and the surgeons that we work with. But when B series comes out next year is when we start to really expand, at which point in time, I think we'll feel more confident that we understand the sales process better. We're ready to scale, still in a controlled manner, but we'll really start to scale, as we head into next year.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of cover off is obviously the transition from tech to medtech. I think from myself and a couple of others' opinions of people that we work with, tech moves a lot faster than medtech, and it's quite hard to steer the quite big ship. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is the actual regulatory side, although talking to a few others, people feel that it's more of a deep ingrained culture that things just move slower, and it's hard to get the right people in medtech who have that iteration mindset of tech that moves so quickly. So I wanted to find out about how you found the transition. Was there anything that surprised you when you came into the medtech world? How's your experience been coming from the tech world where things move super quick, coming over to medtech where even if it's a fast company. It's still slow compared to other industries.
Yeah, that's probably been the biggest difference is the speed and the culture difference. So there's good reason for it. You got to be very careful if you break things in healthcare. So you can't really move fast and break things like you can in other industries. So that's a very, very good reason to have a different risk reward curve in healthcare than you may have in internet companies, or even in AI companies. Like the folks doing the large language models, et cetera. However, what I feel like has happened in this industry, in my observation in the past few years that I've been involved with it, is that culture of caution has gone too far. Where there's a little too much of a CYA. We're going to make these decisions. We're going to check these boxes. We're going to do this thing because everyone before us has done this for 2 or 3 generations. Therefore, I can't get into trouble. Okay, well, that's probably true. You probably won't get into trouble, but at the same time, you're moving very slow. Technology is moving very fast, and there are patients on the other end of it that would maybe benefit from having this technology, and their risk reward curve is different, obviously, than those of us sitting in industry who aren't maybe necessarily feeling like, we're not in the hospital bad or with a loved one in the hospital bad. COVID was an interesting time because it proved to all of us that you actually can move fast if you want to, and move fast in a way that's generally safe, right? And actually has a big impact and allows people to get back to their lives much more quickly. So these aren't laws of physics. These are not some immutable sort of risk reward point we've placed ourselves on the risk reward curve that is optimal. These are decisions we've made that are influenced by multiple generations, I believe, of employees that have come through the system and have been trained in that way. Okay. So I think the biggest challenge I see within the industry for how do you absorb a lot of technology into healthcare is a cultural problem. It isn't much else than that. It's really a cultural problem. And so what's key is finding those people, finding the engineers, finding the regulatory people, finding all of those folks that understand at a deep level, what is the purpose of the regulation? Not, the regulation is the way it is. And, the person who trained me said we have to do this way, so we're doing this way. No, think more deeply. What is the reason for the regulation? What's the purpose of it? Make sure you're being true to the purpose of it. More importantly, make sure you're being true to patient safety. But patient safety has 2 sides to that. One is, don't do things that are going to harm the patient, but also help protect the patient from the things that would happen to them otherwise, and find the right balance in there. And then full disclosure, right? Don't hide anything, talk about everything, make sure everyone's fully informed and fully, aware of what the situation is, and then move forward quickly. I think that's the biggest difference. And that's one of the things we're trying to do at Perimeter. We've got a great team here. There's been a lot of new people have joined. There's been, a lot of new people that are still at the company, and we're slowly building the culture of this company to be able to move fast in a controlled manner, that's going to benefit the patient, not by moving too quickly, but also not by moving too slowly.
Absolutely. And there's definitely founders and CEOs who probably want to move quicker, but are struggling with that kind of culture shift. So you obviously stepped in 2 years ago. You've done lots of work on getting the culture in the team and made some new hires to enable that. How did you get it to move fast? And obviously we don't have any data to kind of back this up, but obviously a feeling of a company. So what were the key things you put in place? How did you go about this problem of it's slow, let's try and speed it up? What were the key things you did there?
One way is just asking why a lot. We have to do this. We have to do this study. We can't say, this thing. We can't say that thing. We can't. And then the question, well, why can't we do this? Why? And force people to really think more deeply about why their brain is wired the way it is to do the thing that they've always done. And if you've got smart people, okay, so there's a couple things. You need to have people that have a learning mentality. What do they call it? A growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. If you have fixed mindset people, you're going to go nowhere. So first of all, you have to have growth mindset people. And then you have to have people that are with their growth mindset, which they naturally will be, is willing to question why they do things and not be afraid to do things differently and want to try new things. And so a lot of that so it's a cultural thing. It's a matter of pushing on that every single day and every single aspect continuously again and again and again. I think one advantage we have, perhaps that maybe other companies don't, or maybe they will over time, is because we have AI as a core component of our business. And the AI industry is moving so quickly, and we're, hiring and living in that world, or at least a part of the companies live in that world. There is part of it from that side of the organization that pushes, in a way. And so I think that helps. It's not just me trying to push that. We've got other parts of the organization. And I will say this, I mean, my company is very small. But you find pockets of people within the organization that are happy to move in that direction, that weren't liking, living in a world where everything is so bureaucratic and so slow. And if you can unlock those people, then they help, unlock other people. And then you start to get it sort of, what they call like a virtuous cycle that happens.
Another quick interruption to tell you about our sponsors, KUKA. KUKA is a global leader in robotics with over 25 years of experience partnering with medtech companies on their journey to market. Their reputation is built on robust technology, reliability, and long-term collaboration. More than a supplier, KUKA provides trusted support throughout the product lifecycle, from development to integration and beyond. For companies exploring robotic solutions, the KUKA LBR Med offers a ready-to-integrate, state-of-the-art option that meets the highest medical standards, without the need to build from scratch. If you want to find out more, then head to the show notes and follow the link to KUKA's website.
Awesome. And like building that momentum up is like, it's just that first domino needs to fall, and then first person starts to move quicker and allows it. So I think that's awesome. Did you have to bring in a lot of new people to try and get that mindset and bring in that external influence, or was there already some people within Perimeter who were already ready to take on that challenge and move quicker?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I was a little bit lucky, in that there were a number of people in senior executive positions, and then, within the organization in manager and director positions, that had that. Not everyone, but many that were of that type. And so it was a matter of giving them permission to move in this direction, supporting that, demonstrating that. And it's a continuous journey, right? So it's been a few years. It's been 2 years. We're pushing, and you're trying to do that all within the construct of, running the business, right? And when you have a small company, it's a bit challenging also, because there are critical people to the business that are really needed just to keep the wheels on the business, right? So the culture shift can happen very quickly in terms of the messaging from the top. And the enabling of the folks who believe in that way, and that's what needs to be done. But then the evolution of the company, when you've got such a small team with an operational company that needs to worry about supply chain, needs to worry about commercial sales, collecting invoices, running a trial, working with the FDA. It takes time to get there. So the job's not done. We're still working through it. But I feel happy, because we do have a very strong portion of the organization, a very large portion of the organization that thinks this way. So I'm fully confident what we're getting in the right place.
Very good. So what are the strategic priorities for the company right now? What's next? Where does this go? What are the steps? And I guess the final one is, where's the long-term vision of where you want this to go?
Yeah. So if I look, okay, let's do short-term and long-term. Short-term is work with the FDA on the review process, help address any concerns you might have, and hopefully get approval for the next generation AI product early next year. So that's a major focus for us. Another major focus for us is expanding our commercial base, increase that revenue, grow the revenue, get our tech into more surgeons' hands, get more familiarity within the administrations of these relatively large hospital groups, so that they see the benefits of the technology, and that sort of awareness and usage and data collection. So really driving that commercial engine. Another focus, which is always the case for a company like us, is making sure we're capitalized. So fundraising, making sure that investors understand our successes, and then understand the future off this company, the future potential of this company, and what the tech and what the market will really, will bear. So there's an effort on that front. So I think those are the three sort of current, immediate things where most of the resources are being applied today. Where this company goes in the future, just to answer that second question, is, remember, the core technology is very careful to say that core technologies is this imaging engine that we have and the AI. We're starting with breast cancer surgeries, but there's no reason to stop at breast cancer. There's all the cancers. Breast is a smaller portion of, all the rest of the cancers out there. We're in surgery, but there's value in this technology in pathology. There's value in this technology at the biopsy stage. So there's immense amount of growth. I really see this as being a platform company that can go in many, many directions. So that's kind of the vision of where this company is going to go in the future.
Love that. And that's touching basically it's all the kind of phases of cancer, from identification all the way through to treatment. That's pretty epic. What are your kind of beachheads of, like, you're obviously, breast is the first starting point and it's the entry point. Maybe it's a bit confidential, or maybe you have a good idea, but what's next in terms of the procedures or the indications?
Yeah, so we've started to work with a few other tissue types, surgeons who do other types of cancer. So we've collected some data already on head and neck cancers. So there's some work in progress on that. We've looked a little bit at skin cancer. Step one is to understand, can you actually tell the difference between healthy cells and cancerous cells, from looking at pictures of it? And both of those seem to indicate there's something there that we can, build a second and a third vertical around beyond the breast tissue. And then there's a number of other surgeons that we're talking to about different tissue types. So what'll end up happening is it's relatively low cost for us to start to work with a surgeon, collect images. So we can have multiple of those in parallel, like ongoing in parallel. And then we'll have to choose, okay, which one looks the most promising? Which one are we going to double down on? Which one are we going to do a formal study on and go and get the label claims, then build a sales force around? And that's where the real investment comes in. So, that's kind of how we're looking at it. Yeah.
Cool. One of the things you mentioned as well was around making sure you're capitalized. You obviously mentioned quite a big name investor, Social Capital and Chamar from there. So does that help with when you're approaching investors to have a big name on the cap table? And how important is it that the capitalization of the company is done for a company like this with big names on the board?
Yeah, it's very important. And it's been very beneficial for us to have Social Capital's name on the cap table. That firm's a very sophisticated technology. They understand how to evaluate technologies. And so that's sort of a check mark for investors looking and say, okay, it probably is a real AI thing in this company. Even if I don't understand AI myself, Social Capital decided to put money in, there's some substance there. So that's important. And I think that's what people are looking for. If AI is so new, it's hard to really understand for healthcare investors whether, and everyone's talking about their AI, right? Everyone's got their special AI they're putting in their medical devices, but are they really? Or, the internal joke, is it really AI or is it just a pivot table in a spreadsheet? And far too often it's just a pivot table in a spreadsheet that's got a little bit of basic statistics on it, and people are calling that AI. So I think it's important for healthcare investors when they look at it and validate us to have someone else that understands AI and is able to look at it and say, yeah, there's something real here. These guys are actually doing deep learning. They understand it. They understand the hardware. They understand the data management. They understand the algorithms. They understand how to bring all that together. Once we get through the review process with the FDA, we'll be one of the first class 3 devices to have AI in it. So, knock on wood, that happens sooner rather than later. Investors will look and say, okay, not only can these guys do the technology thing, but they can also do it to a level of standard that the FDA is going to say, okay, we think this is safe for patients and effective for patients to be able to put into the surgeon's hands. So I think all of that's very important when investors look at a company like us and understand whether they ought to put money behind us or someone else.
Okay. So if, let's just say, an investor is looking at this, a medtech investor who doesn't necessarily understand AI as deeply as someone like Social Capital, I agree. There's a lot of companies out there that seem to have AI because it might get an extra few million in the pitch and say, yes, we're building AI for our technology. And a lot of the time it's not really AI. So how can investors spot that? Like it's obviously quite an abstract idea without really understanding AI and getting into the technology and seeing the algorithm and getting really deep. How can investors look to spot, is this actually AI or is this just, as you say, a pivot table with some statistics on it?
Yeah. The best thing to do is just ask them to speak to the AI team. And the AI team may or may not be investor, like, not friendly is not the right word, but sometimes engineers communicate in different words than finance people.
Yeah.
Let's just say that. But you can get a good sense, from them, whether like how sophisticated they are. You can ask what other types of things they've done with the AI already implemented. Right now, if you've got a company that has AI, you should have multiple generations of multiple different types of algorithms already in the works and a very clear idea of how you're going to improve that over time, right? And where are your trade-offs being made? What's the sophistication of your algorithm? How much data do you have? What are the drawbacks to the data? You've got some big library, but talk to me about the quality of your library. Where do you wish you had higher quality? How do you wish you had higher quality? And then listen to what they're saying. And if the answers are kind of trivial, then that's a big, red flag. But if the answers are thoughtful and deep and, quality of data is something they talk about, a sophistication of algorithms, something they talk about, a match or a mismatch, a sophistication of the hardware versus the algorithm versus the data, is very important. Like, do they understand that you could have the most complicated algorithm in the world, but if you don't have tons of data, you're going to get really bad output. Or if you don't have very fast hardware, it's going to take that algorithm an hour in the operating room, to make a decision. And then I think that's important. And then depending on what level you as an investor have educated yourself in terms of AI technology, if you do come from a tech background, then you should be able to sniff out whether the AI engineers kind of, if there's something real there or not. But if not, there's lots of people around that'll help you, right? Find a trusted person that understands that. And then the other thing I would say, and maybe this is just, promoting my own book sort of thing, but who's leading the company? Is it a technologist or is it a finance person? Or is it do they come from a big company? Like, have they spent their entire career working for the very, very large medical device companies? Or do they have startup background? Right now with AI, you have to have a startup mindset. Otherwise, you're not going to attract the right talent. You're not going to be able to make the right move. So if you come from a big plodding industry giant, it's going to be much harder to build that AI company out. So I think as an investor, you kind of have to look at those things, and make your decisions based off of that.
You've obviously talked about this being FDA cleared already for the Series S device, and the Series B is looking in the future. I'm sure that a lot of European and also global surgeons and health systems would want to get this into their hands. So I know there's lots of challenges around the regulatory process in Europe versus the FDA and their openness to it. But what kind of timelines do you think Europe is on? And also in terms of AI guidance from a regulatory perspective, how much harder or easier is it in Europe versus in the US?
Yeah, so I think, from a terms of timeline, assuming the early next year holds for the FDA to finish their review, then what I would expect is that we start to explore expansion out of the US later next year, right? And start to get our hands around, okay, what does that actually mean? And the two markets that are the obvious next steps for us is Canada, because that's where we're based, and Europe, because it's easier to move from, Canada and America into the European market from there. So those are top of our list. From an AI regulatory standpoint, I'll be quite honest with you, we haven't looked into that. However, the HIPAA laws, the patient privacy laws in America are quite strict about what can and can't be done with patient data. So we have to, and we are compliant, have to be and are compliant to those regulations in the United States. So I think that helps us, when we go into Europe to explain, okay, look, we are protecting data to the standards that from the US side that HIPAA requires us to. So maybe that's sufficient, maybe it's insufficient, but certainly it's going to, cover the majority of what the concerns might be. And then we'll have to cover up whatever, else they need us to. That's number one. Number two is on the AI side, we're not using generative AI, where I know that's possibly where some of people's concerns come from. Like, can you hallucinate? Can you make things up? What if you're guiding things, down the wrong path? But we don't use generative AI. So we use a more like an image recognition type of algorithm, which is much less risky, and doesn't have a lot of doesn't poke on a lot of the concerns that people have right now with AI. So I don't think that ought to be a challenge. And then beyond that, I think, we'll continuously evolve our data sets and evolve our algorithms. We'll try and get more specific demographics into our data set. Right now is very broad, but, people are different types of people, age, ethnicity, BMI has differences on how things look like under camera. So building out more and more of the data sets, I think will help improve the algorithms in ways that, surgeons and of course regulators just like to see more precision in the data set. So I think we'll cross that when we get to it, but I'm not too concerned about us having to do a really big heavy lift to bring this into Europe.
Fair enough. So what are you most excited about for the next stages of the company? What are you most excited for?
For me, it's about growing the commercial side of the business. We've got a technology right now that surgeons and hospitals really, really like out there in the form of the S series. With the B series, it looks like we'll be able to address most of the adoption concerns, which is evidenced by the number of people we've got on our waiting list right now to get their hands on the technology. So this is, ask anyone that runs a business, this is the best place to be. You've got a product that everyone wants. It solves a big problem. And now the challenge is, how do you grow fast enough to be able to support that? So there's always challenges, but this is the best challenge. This is the thing that's most exciting for me. This is where I really, I really get excited about, okay, let's solve this problem. How do we do this thing we're doing with a couple dozen, customers and do it for hundreds and thousands and scale the organization, scale the manufacturing, scale the sales team, scale everything up to be able to do that. The demand's there. The product is, very attractive to customers. So now it's a matter of just getting it out to more people's hands.
Awesome. And so if there's one final thing you wanted to leave the audience with, is there anything we haven't talked about today that you want people to know about Perimeter?
I think it's that Perimeter has a platform technology with the OCT imaging system, as well as the AI, team and algorithms and sort of whole system we've got set up there to have continuous improvement. And it solves a very, very important problem that's very impactful, both from a health standpoint as well as an economic standpoint. So it's almost a perfect market. And we've got a solution that seems to be head and shoulders above anything else that's out there. And this is probably the biggest problem that cancer surgeons have right now, is how to make sure they've got clear margins. And so a very high profile problem, a very high impact problem, and a solution that is, seeming to be much, much better than anything else out there. And we're small. And so, here's my pitch. Look at us, and we're always in capitalization mode. We're public. So you can actually follow us. We build everything in public now, and you can invest in us publicly. So, you can look us up there. If you'd like to join our company, we're growing, right now, mostly in the US and only in the US and Canada. So if you're interested in joining a company like ours, reach out. We've got job posting on the website, and you can reach out through there, just in general. And I think, keep an eye on us. This is going to be the next few years going to be really, really big for us. So keep watching this space.
Epic. Adrian, thank you so much for joining me. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Henry.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Crux of MedTech podcast. If you're not already doing so, please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or follow the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Crux. Crux is a medtech search firm which places pioneers in transformative roles to help us live longer, healthier lives. We do 3 things for companies. We help hire world-class executive talent. We help companies raise investment from Series A to Series C and execute upon M&A. And we also are building a community of medtech leaders to facilitate peer-to-peer learning and accelerate the companies to help them go faster. If you're interested in any of those 3 things, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or follow the link in the show notes to find out more. Thank you.